Well, hello, and welcome to Cannabis Q&A. My name is Jim Francis. I'm the Chief Research Officer at CRB Monitor. CRB Monitor is a database that currently tracks more than 55,000 cannabis-related businesses, and at the heart of our database are more than 140,000 cannabis licenses which underlie all of those businesses. As part of our focus on capturing industry trends, we've launched a new series of interviews with business and thought leaders within the cannabis industry. And in each interview, we'll cover a range of topics from technology to regulation and other business and macro trends shaping the cannabis industry. I hope you find it very interesting. So today, I'm so very pleased to be joined by Jessica Billingsley, the CEO of Akerna Corporation. And as one of the largest enterprise software companies serving the cannabis industry, Akerna consolidates cannabis technology companies to connect data points in the global cannabis supply chain, and they do a great job of that. Not surprisingly, they are also covered by CRB Monitor, and they are a company that you can find on our platform. Akerna's seed to sale enterprise resource planning platform, or ERP, has set an industry standard, and Ms. Billingsley is here to give us her insights into the global economy, the current regulatory environment, and how Akerna is positioned to succeed in a rapidly evolving industry. Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining me today. Akerna has been covered by CRB Monitor since your initial listing on NASDAQ back in June of 2019, and you would be defined as a tier 2 cannabis-related business, much like we are. While you're not plant touching, you derive a majority of your revenue from the cannabis industry. And so to start, maybe you can just spend a few minutes and tell us a bit about yourself and Akerna and why you chose the cannabis industry as a place to launch your business.
Sure thing, and thanks so much for having me. So I am the CEO, founder, and board chair of Akerna, which is a leading enterprise software company and the developer of the most comprehensive technology infrastructure, ecosystem, and compliance engine today powering the global cannabis industry. So we provide compliance, data, payments, seed to sale, track and trace, ERP, and consulting to operators, governments, and brands. And I got into the cannabis industry because I've always been fascinated by the potential that technology has to change lives. And I wanted to have a part in building software that improves the way we live. And actually, my initial interest in the cannabis industry was on the medical side. I saw some promising studies for cannabis's healing benefits for multiple ailments. And in particular, I had a close family member who suffered from a demyelinating illness similar to MS. And so I was very interested in the track and trace, the accountability portions of being able to understand what is in this product, how can we account for it safely, how can the patients and of course now consumers really understand and know what they're getting. And it's funny, we're a more than 12-year-old business today. I think I'm one of the few 12-year-old businesses in cannabis that can say we've never pivoted. We still, that's what we do today. We're, as you mentioned, the first cannabis tech company to trade on NASDAQ, and we still provide a comprehensive platform today with traceability and accountability at the core of our offerings.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that. We've been in the industry for 8 years, and we feel like veterans as well. So, well, congratulations on so many good years. Next, I wanted to talk a bit about the global economy. Recent world events over the past few years have thrown what I would call an inflationary wet blanket over an already vulnerable global economy. It's obviously hit almost every industry. Given that Akerna is a global technology company serving multiple countries, and I think it's in the teens, it's quite a few, can you give us your outlook for the global macroeconomy and how it might affect the cannabis industry in the near term?
Gosh, that's a great question. And what I think is interesting, and maybe an interesting thing about cannabis for investors to consider right now, is I think you can think of cannabis as a hedge against a larger downturn. Cannabis is in a category that's proven to be recession resilient, along with, ordinary categories that we think of as being recession resilient, like consumer staples and alcohol, beverage, et cetera. And cannabis really proved that, especially at the start of COVID. And so I think that's the most important thing, is to look at an industry where, I'm sure all of your tracking metrics show what we've been tracking, which is it's trading at 52-week lows here, where we're really probably poised really well as a hedge against downturn. And then I think maybe one last thing to mention about sort of broader economic outcomes is that many times crisis leads to policy change. So if you think about it, crisis led to the Federal Reserve, the FDIC, the SEC, and more. And we certainly have our eyes on lawmakers as they continue to discuss various forms of legislation.
Yeah, I would agree. And actually, that's an excellent segue into our next question, which is about legalization. So I wanted to talk a bit about how things are going in the regulatory space. And the next question is about progress toward federal legalization of cannabis. Now, we've seen gradual progress and movement at the state level. By CRB Monitor's count, we've got 37 states now with legalized medical cannabis, and 18 of those have legalized recreational use cannabis. And that also includes District of Columbia as well as Puerto Rico. And there is recent progress at the federal level, as we've seen recently. The House taking another shot at the MORE Act, the Senate working on new iterations of the Safe Banking Act. Of course, there's no guarantees there, though, because what we see, particularly in the Senate, I think is where things get kind of difficult. And so my question to you, Jessica, is do you see legalization happening at the federal level anytime soon? I mean, I kind of do, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. So if it doesn't happen in the near term, what do you think the impact will be for businesses like Akerna that are so closely tied to the cannabis industry?
It's important, as much of what's happening with cannabis, and as you mentioned, the conflict, the continuing conflict, U.S. federal state conflict here in the U.S. continues to drive some pretty interesting factors in the industry, with so many legal markets and the continuing conflict. We've really seen an acceleration of consolidation. But I want to answer the first part of your question, which is around the timing piece. And in my opinion, while the timing remains elusive, this is now not an if discussion, it's a when discussion. And certainly my experience in lobbying now for many, many, many years on Capitol Hill is that's largely the shift in discussion is when and how versus if. And so one of my hats I wear is the chair of U.S. Cannabis Council, our trade association working toward federal legalization. And just recently, a large group of cannabis CEOs who are members of USCC and I traveled to DC, and we met with lawmakers of both political parties and both chambers to discuss that reform. And I think it's interesting. There's a number of pieces of legislation, and we could get into some of the details, but maybe more important to that would be just to share an overarching view of this, that I think that it is an unbelievably positive step that in the past year, we've seen draft comprehensive legislation from the Senate and from the democratically led draft with the Cannabis Administration Opportunity Act from Senators Schumer, Booker, and Wyden. That's a huge step. But we also have seen now a piece of comprehensive cannabis legalization that is Republican co-sponsored, proposed in the House with the States Reform Act, authored by Representative Nancy Mace. So I think both those are really important, and maybe just important to share how does law work at the federal level in our country. And it's wonderful that those have been proposed. They are unlikely to pass in totality the
Right.
first time they've been introduced. That said, the conversation, the debate, and now the ability to pass through many pieces of that legislation, the groundwork has probably been laid and the right conversations can be had about what regulation looks like at the federal level. And we are closely watching safe banking, which is currently included in the House version of the Competes Act and could make it through in conference when the Senate and the House conference over that bill. So we'll be looking for some incremental pieces and potentially also the Joyce AOC HOPE Act. That's another piece that we'll be tracking this year.
An awful lot going on. We'll have to have you back for just to talk about that specifically.
Sure, we could talk about that all day.
Absolutely. So let's move on and to talk about something I'm sure you can opine on very well is business trends, but also technology trends. And recently, Akerna completed its acquisitions of 365 Cannabis, and that was recently. That was back in October of 2021. And prior to that, Viridian Sciences in April 2021. We cover both of those companies at CRB Monitor, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about them. We've also seen significant M&A activity in the last few years related to cannabis-related businesses, plant-touching businesses. And so my next question for you is really two parts. So can you tell us first about the two acquisitions, the 365 and the Viridian Sciences, how they fit into your strategy? And part two, how do you see the cannabis industry evolving in general over the next few years, given sort of all this activity?
Oh gosh, okay, so that's break that into a couple parts.
Loaded question.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. I think it's just starting with how we see the industry evolving is exactly the reason for our acquisition strategies to serve the growing needs of the cannabis industry and its evolution. And as more of these markets legalize, scaling has become more critical than ever. And to successfully scale a business, there is an increased reliance on supply chain software and enterprise class accounting systems to improve operational efficiencies while still tracking that seed to sale compliance. So in anticipation of this, we prioritized creating a portfolio of leading financial and tax planning systems integrated to our core compliance. So we have our own integrations with SAP, NetSuite, and Sage, and then we continued that strategy with our acquisitions of Viridian, which is built on SAP Business One, and 365 Cannabis, which is built on Microsoft 365. So now our integrations cover a majority of the mainstream mid-market tax and financial planning market. And we see this as a crucial competitive advantage and one that none of our competitors have pursued. So regardless of a cannabis business's preference for a particular accounting, tax suite, or other traditional ERP add-ons, we have the widest solution to meet those needs. And that leading to maybe the second part of your question there. So why over the next few years, what are the growth drivers that we see? Why have we focused on this? I think there are three main growth drivers. I think there's operator consolidation, US federal action, which we discussed a couple minutes ago, and then international movement also. So that consolidation is happening with expansion into new states as we continue to have new states and new markets open. And then also we're seeing our clients really scale their operations within existing states. And that consolidation among operators that are also rapidly scaling is driving technology adoption. And, I think we beat the horse to death here on the long anticipated US federal action, but we certainly we do expect to see something there, and we're prepared for that inevitability. And in the meantime, for new state markets to continue to open. But then the last one I just want to touch on is the international opportunity. That is, we're also seeing that come in waves, much like the state new markets and legalization efforts. And with their experience and access to capital, our existing clients headquartered in North America are likely to capture a large portion of that market expansion potential. So having the technology systems to expand with them as they extend their footprint has been an important foundational piece of our strategy.
That's great. Sounds like you're well positioned. So, and this is sort of along those lines. I hope it's not too overly repetitious, but it's something that really, it's selfishly I want to hear about. So over the last year, we've witnessed, several mergers and acquisitions, and so the most recent, as you know, Cresco Labs has announced that they're going to acquire Columbia Care, and when I look at that. That business combination, one of them is kind of just a smaller version of the other. Both MSOs, they're in multiple states, so they do they're able to kind of diversify across more states. We also look at things at the license level, and we see them effectively, doubling the diversification of their license issues. So they certainly made an interesting move, and I think we might see some more of this going forward as prices are really depressed. Both of these companies are down 50-something% over the last 3 years. So I think it's wise they're playing defense. And so my question for you related to this is what is Akerna's approach to consolidation? So how I imagine lots of MSOs are your customers, and so as you see this evolution and you see the sort of consolidation happening in the industry, what do you do? Is it about sort of more product development? Is it about geographic expansion, international expansion? Is it about maybe making additional acquisitions down the road? So I just wanted to hear about how you guys approach this.
Sure. We thought of our inorganic strategy as, and this applies to our strategic partnerships in addition to our outright acquisitions. We think about it in if we imagine a Venn diagram that these ideally overlap a little bit. Market share focused, competitor market share focused acquisitions, product tuck-in or bolt-in targets, and then also TAM expanding, so addressable market expanding acquisitions. And so when we think about those, what you've seen us do mostly are the market share and product tuck-in acquisitions, where we focused on acquiring companies that provided similar technology, but that we had some valuable piece of tech that we maybe didn't have, that we could connect to our ecosystem, connect to our network, and provide more value in some way. So a great example of this would be the recent 365 acquisition, where we're in process. We'll connect it to our compliance engine, connect it to our payments capability, and then we'll be able to offer 365 in more markets. And also offer that more enterprise offering to the industry as the industry's been scaling and growing. And then if we think about the TAM expanding technology, we have over 80 integrated partners and maybe a dozen strategic partner relationships. And so we'll be opportunistic there about where the business model makes sense, the revenue model. And in particular, we're very focused on TAM expanding technology that allows us to participate in the volume growth of the industry.
Yeah, it can't be easy though. There's so many moving parts. So
Sure.
to close things out, CRB Monitor's research team follows the cannabis news cycle very closely, and so we update our subscribers with the latest regulatory filings, press releases, exchange announcements, and that's what sort of drives the day-to-day maintenance of our data. And so, given the industry's uncertainty to the regulatory environment, as well as things like illicit market cannabis and the global economy, as we discussed, what kind of good news can you offer Akerna's shareholders?
Sure. Well,
it's all been good news, but it was just summing up good news.
Akerna has been at the forefront of preparing for the coming changes. So I think that's important. At the heart of every decision we make as an executive management team is this question: does this provide value to the cannabis industry of tomorrow?
Right.
We're committed to being the best enterprise software solution available to serve both the cannabis industry of today and tomorrow, accounting for every level of government regulation and every point in the supply chain. And so we deliver on that commitment in three main ways. First, we're actioning on our plan to deliver long-term value through the metrics we report, the strategic partnerships we cultivate and announce, and how we structure our product offerings to serve the growing enterprise market. Second, we're capitalizing on those three main growth drivers of the industry that I previously mentioned: consolidation, the future US federal action, and of course, international expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, we have well prepared our technology for domestic and international countrywide legalization. We're ready to scale. I think I just add, at Akerna, we remain grateful for our team members, for their passion and hard work, our clients for their confidence and commitment, and of course, our shareholders for their support.
Yeah, and that's all great. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that those last two acquisitions were very timely, and I think place you in an excellent position to compete. So that's all the time we have for today. And I'd like to thank our guest, Jessica Billingsley, the CEO of Akerna, for joining us today. And I wish you and Akerna all the success in the future. And for our viewers out there, stay tuned for our next interview in our series of Q&As with leaders in the cannabis industry. And for the ultimate in cannabis market intelligence, please be sure to check out crbmonitor.com. And thank you again. It was really great to talk to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Gemma. It was a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.